John Stettin, Past the Wire, here in the studio, and another racetrack tale from the Sport of Kings. Hope you like it. It's another one that's near and dear to my heart because this one involves my dad, who, in addition to being my dad, was also my best friend. We were very, very close, and you know, people are, of course, partial and biased to their parents, and they should very well be. But my dad stuck with me and stood behind me through thick and thin, through all the trials and tribulations, all the tears, all the pain, all the good memories, bad memories, whatever it was. He was always there, always in my corner, always had my back 100%. And, we never had much. He was a poor guy. We struggled a lot, when I was growing up. But we lived well anyway, and we made a lot of great memories, and we had a lot of great experiences. And one thing that people always asked me, which I thought was a little humorous because I knew the answer and they didn't, was people always asked me, why do you call your dad Joe or Giuseppe? How come you don't call him Dad? And that stemmed from something that just kind of evolved when I was young. I never really had a conventional lifestyle, and didn't grow up, in the norm, so to speak. It was a norm for Brooklyn, but it certainly wasn't the norm for a lot of other parts of the country. And if you're from Brooklyn and a lot of places in New York City and some other big cities, then you understand what I mean. But Brooklyn was kind of its own world with its own laws, its own values, its own codes. And I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But it was definitely different. And, outside of Brooklyn, you were not looked upon the same as inside of Brooklyn in the way that we all grew up. But, that said, when I was growing up, I called my dad Joe or Giuseppe because obviously it was his name. But when he used to bring me to the racetrack, which, I grew up around the racetrack. He was a mutual clerk, so he was taking me there when I was very young. And, hanging around his window, talking to him, he would say to me, don't call me Dad, call me Joe or Giuseppe or whatever, because, call me by my name, because it looks better for people. A lot of people knew I was his son, but the ones that didn't, it just didn't look right to him for, having your kid hanging around the window. So, fast forward a couple of years, when I was 15 or 16, I had already stopped going to school for all intents and purposes. I used to go to what they called homeroom and then cut out and go, hang out with my friends in Bedford Park and wherever else, and, play pinball, play poker, do other things that was leading me on a path to a successful career in juvenile delinquency. And obviously, that's not something that your parents want to see. So by the time I was 15 or 16, I believe, I think 16, when you could officially drop out of school, I did. My parents were very upset about it, and my dad, in all his wisdom, said, hey, if you think you're going to drop out and be hanging out with your friends all day long and getting in trouble, you got another thing coming. You're coming to work with me. And I was like, bing, okay. I love the races anyway, but now I had to really hone my skills because I was going to be spending a lot of time there. So my dad used to bring me to the track with him, not only on the weekends, but on, weekdays as well, to keep me out of trouble. Sometimes my friends would come, sometimes they wouldn't. But I knew a lot of people there. We were all friends. The track was crowded all the time back there, even during the week. But I was there early because we had to go in early for the mutual clerks. I was there all day long. And after a while, I worked there as a mutual clerk and a jockey agent for a little while, and walked some hearts and rubbed some horses and some things on the backside here and there. But for the most part, I was hanging around the racetrack. Now, when I used to hang around the racetrack and go by his window, I used to call him, Joe and Giuseppe because of what I said. But my dad was very generous, and two interesting things evolved out of that. And one was my, quote, perpetual line of credit, because when my dad wanted to bet, now, you gotta understand, it was very different back then. All the mutual clerks bet, at least 99% of them. And there was so much going on behind the windows. There was people loan sharking, taking action, doing all kinds of things, until they really cleaned it up and did it right. And everybody had a box. And at the end of the day, you used to balance out your box and then turn it into the money room downstairs. And they used to keep about anywhere from 2,500 to 5,000 in the box overnight, okay? And you would take a report how much you're supposed to have, you count it, you put it in the box, lock it up, but only you counted it and only you locked it up. They would officially count out people where you had to go to the money room and stay a little late one night and count your money and make sure it balanced once a week. And guess what? They didn't count everybody out the same day. Some people counted out Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So everybody had a different count out day. And if you were short 1,000 or 2 in your box and your count out day was Monday, you would go to somebody whose count out day was Wednesday. Hey, I'm short 1,000 or 2. Can you give it to me? He'd give it to you out of his box. You'd put it in your box. You'd count out. You'd balance out. His box was short. Nobody knew but him and you. And then Wednesday, you'd give it back to him. He'd count out. And people were running negative balances in their boxes all over the place all the time. It was like just how it was done back then. And they were all betting. So my dad used to like to bet, and what would happen was he would sometimes have me, I'd go to his window to say who I liked, or what are you doing, or bring him a cup of coffee, or whatever the case may be, and he'd be like, stay right there, I want to make a few bets. And he would be betting while I was standing at his window, and people were online behind me, because there were always lines back then. It wasn't like it is today, where you go to the window and have a sandwich with somebody and nobody comes up behind you. Wasn't like that. There was always people there. So he would say, stay right there, stay right there. We'd bet the tickets, and he'd put them in his pocket, say, okay, go, and I'd go. And ultimately, I used to stop betting, and I would take the tickets, and I didn't have any money. I was a kid. And he'd be like, what are you doing? I'd be like, if I win, I'll pay you. And I evolved to an indefinite line of credit. And eventually, as I got good, he didn't mind, because I would bet the tickets. Then he would bet them, and when I would win, he wouldn't even take any money from me, because he won too. And he never really cared about taking any money from me. Whatever happened, he was just more than happy to give me, even when he had nothing. But the funny part of this story that I'm trying to get to, and I teased him about this for years, because as we got older, and once I became a professional player and was betting big money and doing well and really, hitting hard in the game, he used to tease me that I taught you everything you know. And I'd be like, no way, I taught you everything you know. And the biggest hit you ever made was a mistake, which was the truth. And it's a really funny story, but we were up at Saratoga, and my dad used to work the $50 window in the paddock, facing like the jockey's room, not facing the paddock where the walk around was, facing the other way, that very first window. Worked it for years. I grew up every summer hanging out in front of that window. And people, a lot of the big bettors and a lot of the owners and agents and people in the know back then, sharp bettors used to bet at that window, and bet with my dad, and they all knew him. So, and every now and then, my dad wasn't like me. He liked to follow other people and bet, where he thought sharp money was going, where I always kind of did my own thing. But one day, and it was very, very funny, I go up to his window, and I make a few bets, and he goes, stay right there, stay right there. A lot of really sharp people are betting the 4. I want to make a couple of bets. And he started betting, and he said, I'm going to bet a couple of exacta and triple boxes. And I'm like, what are you going to bet? He goes, I'm going to bet some $10 exact and triple boxes. And he started punching, bing, 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 boom, boom, putting tickets in his pocket. Bing, 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 putting tickets in his pocket. Bing, 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 putting tickets in his pocket. And he's punching, and he's punching, and he's punching, much more than normal. So obviously I thought he believed in what he said. So I looked at the floor. The floor was like 8 or 9 to 1. I was like, all right, whatever. So he put all the tickets in his pocket, and he's like, okay, go. I went, and there was a big line. Line started moving again. I was there a long time. People obviously thought I was the one betting for a long time, so kind of, you did what you had to do. So sure enough, the race goes off, and the 4 runs second, okay? Now, my dad bet so many tickets, I could tell he got confused. He normally didn't bet that much money. And they used to put the boards up between the races back then. So, the board was up. I'm waiting there. He takes the board down, and he sees me, and he goes, stay right there, stay right there. And he looks all nervous and confused. And he's looking at tickets and putting them down on his window. And he's got like this scared look on his face. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I made a big mistake. I'm like, what? He goes, I thought I was hitting $10 exacta in triple boxes. I somehow hit $100. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I bet like, I don't know, 5,000. Let me add this up. All this. He didn't even know who won. Now the 4-run second, and I look up, I don't remember who it was that won, but the horse that won was like 16-1. So it was a 16-1 on top of a 9-1. So anyway, he's looking, and he's like, oh, at least this one's a winner. When he's putting it aside, he's like, man, I'm like, relax, you're in good shape. He goes, what are you talking about? I bet all of that. I said, don't even worry. Anyway, make a long story short, all right? He winds up collecting about $40,000 because of a mistake. He thought he was going to have 10, but he wound up hitting the exacta for 100 or 2, the triple for 100 or 2, because he was boxing, which I never do. And, you know, he made this mistake. Instead of $10, he punched $100. And had it not won, he would have been short in the box $5,000-$6,000. And we would have had a problem. We would have had to go to one of the people to borrow money and even it out, whatever the case may be. But that didn't happen. He won. So needless to say, it was a very nice rest of the summer at Saratoga. But how my dad was that night, you know, we went out to dinner, had a very, very nice dinner. It sunk in, the mistake that he made. And the very next morning, we went to the Toyota dealer and he bought me a brand new top-of-the-line Toyota Supra, which was a top-of-the-line car back then, was much better than the 6-year-old Monte Carlo that I was driving. And that's just how he was. And you know, he just paid cash, boom, it's yours, here's the keys, enjoy it, God bless. And that was how he was. And of course, gave me a pocket full of money as well. Never wanted anything for himself. But the funny part is, the biggest win my dad ever made was by mistake. Because he just messed up. So in theory, there are right mistakes and wrong mistakes. People think you can't make a right mistake. That's not true. You can make a right mistake, and my dad proved it, and I benefited from it. And I kept that line of credit for a long time, but eventually paid it back way more than tenfold. So all good, and miss my dad very much every single day. And every time I do anything that has to do with horse racing, you know, him and my mom are both in my mind. A lot of great memories, and I'll bring you some more of them. Hope you like them. And John Stettin, Past the Wire, often imitated, never duplicated. The only place you get my thoughts is right here. So we'll be back with more. Ciao for now.